Hi guys, it's Shauna Harrison. I am here with Mind Body Green and Tom's of Maine for Wellness Week. I am a fitness and yoga professional here in Oakland, California in the Bay Area. I love the Bay Area. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about naturing up and finding balance and being able to bring the outside in and sort of talk about this time of year, especially with resolutions and, kind of finding a routine and sticking to a routine and what that entails. I will answer some questions at the end, and if we don't get to your questions, then I'm happy to go back and answer them again. But coming back to this idea of resolutions, this time of year especially is when everybody's talking about resolutions. I personally have talked much on my social media channels as well as in some things that I've written about how I'm not really a big fan of resolutions. I tend to think that, picking just one day, January 1, that you have to start these resolutions and sort of keep going throughout the rest of the year, it isn't necessarily as helpful as constantly kind of being on the search for these goals and using every single day and every single moment as a chance to do that, So it's not that come February 1, if you fell off the wagon and stopped doing whatever it was, that you can't start again immediately. I think that concept does you a disservice, right? Like, I think we can every day, if yesterday you didn't get to, do the workout that you wanted to do, or, whatever your goal was, you can start over today. You can start over right now. And I also think that sort of the daily changes and especially those small changes and those small behaviors that we can do that continually will add up is what creates a habit, right? If you try to go full force and you change everything right away, the chances that you will then eventually come off of that because it's not sustainable are much higher. So if you take a small change and it's something that you can do today, and then maybe tomorrow you change it a little bit more, or maybe next week you change it a little bit more, maybe next month you do, whatever it might be, that it starts to become a habit. If it's something that is sustainable for today, and then you can do it again tomorrow and then continue it forever, then then adding a little tiny change to that will be much more beneficial. If you think about it for running, right? Like, if you've never run, you're not going to go out and run a marathon immediately. You learn and you train yourself and you build on what you've already created as a habit and as, your strength, and then you keep going from there. The one thing that I always say in terms of sticking to a routine and or starting a routine is find something that you like and that you love and that you want to do. Because if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. If you hate running, don't put yourself in a position where you have to run right off the bat. Maybe running will come to you years down the line. Maybe it will never come. That's fine, right? If you like to dance, maybe do that. Or if you like to hike, or, whatever it is that you find that actually speaks to you is what you're going to want to continue to do, right? Because that's going to be something that fills you, that passion, that, whatever sort of emotion that comes out of that will feed you into the rest of trying to continue to do that behavior. The other thing is fitting it in whenever you can. You may not have an hour to work out, with your kids, your job, whatever it might be, but you could take 5 minutes and do something, in between all of those things, and those 5 minutes will add up, especially if you're not doing any kind of movement or training or anything at the moment. Starting something and giving yourself 5 minutes is way more than what you did before, right? 5 minutes is better than nothing. And then just build off of that. So finding those types of things. And lastly, the one thing that I really try to do, and granted, I know that my job is about movement and sort of being able to fit this in at any point because it's my job. But I really, for myself, prioritize my movement, right? Like, so if I'm teaching classes or doing other things where it's not about my own personal movement, I make sure that the time that I want to spend there, if like I want to go train outside and, I have a couple places that I really like to be outside. If I want to go there, I know I have to do it at a certain time. I won't schedule other things in that time. And I really try to stick to that as much as possible. Obviously things come up and that's not always possible, but for the most part, I really try to keep that part of my schedule clean. I write it in my calendar. I know that I don't schedule calls or, anything like that around it. Sometimes it happens. For instance, today I went running and had to take some calls about my broken screen on my phone. And, you know, it was either I could run or I could wait to be on the phone call. And I was like, well, I'm going to run. And if they call me, then I'll answer it. And that's what I did. So sometimes it's just a matter of you make it a priority, however that needs to happen. And again, it doesn't have to be a priority of 2 hours. It could be a priority of 5 minutes. You know, and that could be meditation, that could be yoga, that could be running, that could be jump rope, that could be whatever it is. And I also like to find things that I'm not good at and then continue to try to improve on those and challenge myself and be as adamant about that as possible. I think we often kind of shy away from things that we're not good at. And, you know, I still do that. It's not like I'm completely void of that, but I really, there are things where I know I'm not good at them and I want to be better at them. And those are the things that I really kind of try to go after, because once I get into that mindset and I'm like, okay, well, like for instance, handstands, I couldn't do handstands for a long time, or pull-ups, I couldn't do pull-ups for a really long time. You know, learning how to take steps to get to those things, I think is very valuable, not only from a physical standpoint, but also just from a mental, emotional standpoint, right? Knowing that not everything comes right off the bat. Like sometimes you have to work really hard at taking those incremental steps, and it may take a really long time. I couldn't do a pull-up until I was 34. So, you know, handstands took me a long time as well, and I still don't nail them every single time I get into a handstand. I'm not doing handstand presses or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's always these little goals that you can make, but I think, you know, really learning to go for that failure and being okay with it, that you fall out of a handstand or that you can't actually lift yourself up or whatever it might be, that is, I think, a very valuable tool to use. And it's really just, it's super helpful. And it also gives you that extra sense of accomplishment when you get a little bit closer, even if it's just a tiny bit closer. Like maybe you actually got 1 foot up in the air in that handstand and then you held it for like a second. You know, a second's more than nothing. And if you did nothing yesterday, then you did a second today, then, you know, you sort of progress from there. So I think, you know, finding that failure and seeking that growth, I think, is one of the most valuable things of movement and training, and, you know, one of the things that it can teach us. So with that, I'm going to let you guys ask some questions. So we'll open it up for whatever kind of questions you guys have.
So Sarah asked Shauna, if you had to do one type of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
So the question was, if I had to choose one type of exercise to do for the rest of my life, what would it be? And this is, to me, people always ask, like, what's your favorite exercise to do? And to me, yeah, it feels like trying to answer, like, who's your favorite child? Like, it's like one of the hardest questions for me. It changes on a daily basis. You know, I love running. I love yoga. I love high intensity training. I, you know, love to be able to flip tires and do pull-ups and do all of those things. So I don't actually know that I can answer that question. I like to move in a way that I can really kind of zone out and be in whatever moment it is. Yoga and running tend to be that a lot for me. But then at the same time, like, I just really like to do crazy things, you know, jump rope and I don't know, everything. I just like all of them. Do we have any other questions?
Yes. Matt is asking, just wondering what your PhD is in and why did you decide to pursue that?
Yes. So my PhD is in public health, and, you know, sort of movement and, you know, healthy behaviors have sort of been a part of my whole world for a while now. And I really, after getting a master's in public health, I really wanted to sort of delve into what's behind all of that, you know, sort of the theory and the studies that have been done and those kinds of things. And it's interesting how much they play with what's going on in fitness. And, you know, I'm actually trying to now bridge the gap between the two a little bit more. And I'm really looking forward to kind of bringing some public health into fitness and bringing fitness into public health and kind of trying to, like, figure out how each one can help the other. But yeah, that's how I got into all of the school. And do we have one more question?
Yes. Joe is asking, do you meditate? If so, what does your practice look like?
So I do. I don't do it as often as I would like / should, right? I think a lot of us tend to feel like we should meditate more because we've heard that. I do a lot of sort of mind-body type practices where I'm being very mindful about what I'm doing. Sometimes my runs actually feel extremely, extremely mindful, as well as my yoga practice. In terms of sitting and meditating, I tend to go towards apps to help me with that because I think like a lot of us have a hard time just sitting and really getting into it. That's actually one of the things that I'm really trying to work on right now. And that's going back to what I was saying, one of those challenging things for me that like I really want to try to do better at, and small incremental movements, right? Like I may first start getting more mindful with my yoga and my running, and then hopefully I'll start to move a little bit more into the seated meditation.
Ordeep is asking, what is your favorite workout to increase your productivity?
Ooh, favorite workout to increase productivity. I think any of them, right? Like there's the sort of doing something that's, again, kind of more mindful, like the yoga that kind of centers you and brings you down and not brings you down, but, sort of grounds you into being able to focus to help you increase productivity. But then I also think that there's something really valuable in sort of the more high intensity, learning how to sort of level up and learning, what your limits are and kind of pushing those limits that then can translate into however you're working and what you're doing. So I think it just kind of depends on which pieces of productivity that you're struggling with. But I think any movement in general is really, I see as not only physically helping you in terms of, the benefits that we get from movement, but also everything that you do. I like to think of it as being metaphorical for what's going on in your life, but it's also metamorphical, right? So it's helping you change, but it's also helping, every time you do something that's really, really challenging, you can translate that into whatever you're doing for your career or whatever you're trying to be productive in.
One more. Elizabeth is asking, she's trying to incorporate yoga into her routine, but sometimes I don't have a lot of time to practice. If you had to pick 2 to 3 yoga moves to do every day, what would they be?
Okay, so the question is, if I had to pick 2 to 3 yoga moves, if you're short on time, personally, I love the sun salutations. They never get old to me. I think that they really help kind of move and warm up the body. I think they're great. If you're looking for a little bit more of the yin side or sort of the more meditative side, I mean, even just doing a child's pose or a seated meditation, or a shavasana, to be honest, will sort of ground you and center you. But for me, I would probably pick a sun salutation, sort of the full spectrum of sun salutation A or B, to me is something that I love.
And then Casey is asking, if and when you ever fall out of your routines, what are your best tactics for getting back on track?
So if you ever fall out of your routine is the question, what's the best tactic to get back in? And honestly, it's just taking that one step. And that's one of the reasons why I really think resolutions can be super daunting, right? Because it's like you start January 1st and if you mess up and, oh God, what do you do? Whereas like if you look at it more as a day-to-day, like, oh, today I didn't get in what I was supposed to do during that routine. Tomorrow you can start again. Honestly, 2 hours from now you could start again. Honestly, right now you could start again, right? And that's kind of how I think about it. And I think when you think about it more as something that you get to choose at every single moment of the day, you don't really feel like you fall off necessarily, right? Even if you've skipped your training sessions for a week, it doesn't mean you can't start right this second, and start over. And I think every day gives you the opportunity to do that, and every moment really gives you the opportunity to do that. And that's kind of how I always think about it. To me, I need that movement in my life. And as you can see, I talk with my hands. I move a lot. So for me, I crave it. And I think once you start to get that into your daily routine and it's part of your behavior and it's just a habit, it's part of who you are, it's much, much easier. But you can really start that over at any time. Yeah. Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me, and big thanks to Mind Body Green and Tom's of Maine for having me. And if there's any more questions that you have, feel free to write them in now or at any point, and you can also reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer whatever you have. So thank you again.